What's up, Raiders? Bionic here. Welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video, where today I want to talk about, once again, gear, the reality of farming gear 18 months later into this game. And so I made a video about that not too long ago. Hopefully you guys got some good information out of it. But what I want to do today is cover yet again another type or piece of gear that I typically do not look at. What I mean by not look at is simply the fact that, you know, you see all these other content creators posting endgame stuff with sort of like best in slot gear. And so you assume that that is the only thing you can use for you to reach that kind of performance. And so I think that the perfect example was sort of like my flat stat defense gloves with 4 rolls of speed on it, which I am using right now on my main champion, my main speed lead Arbiter. And so what I have today here is yet another example. As you saw right there with Ethel, we got like 9 seconds. I used to think the only way to get this was obviously with some pretty decent gear, good stats, okay? But like with a certain type of glove that I, again, was not really using before. So what I'm going to do today is compare somewhat stats, and maybe it'll help justify using these types of gloves a little bit more often. So I know you're already wondering, you know, what kind of gloves is he talking about? I'm not reinventing the wheel here. It's obviously not as a drastic change as these gloves right here, which is flat defense, quadruple roll on speed, which I talked about before in that so-called video, okay? The reality of farming gear 18 months later. And here I was trying to play the speed game only, 3 speed leads for Tag Arena. It just wasn't working. I don't have enough of that great gear to make this happen. So then I kind of went into these sort of like defensive builds for Tag Arena. And you know what, guys? It's actually been working quite well. Let me quickly show you before I jump into this. Here's my defense on Tag Arena right now. Okay, we have the passive aggressive, then we have the shield wall, this really sort of high resistance tanky team. And for where I'm at in the game, this seems to be somewhat okay. This one is a little bit out of tune. I need to fix it, but overall, look at my battle log, and like I am getting some wins, okay, with some of these teams right here. The middle passive aggressive team, then we have the high resistance shield wall, and we do have the speed team, which is also winning every once in a while. So today instead, what I'm going to focus on is a champion that I actually used against the Spicy Wing contest versus Scratch, and it was Ethel. So her gear was put together really last minute because I didn't really have anything else, and I was trying to build a couple more nukers to have a bigger roster for that challenge. So what I ended up building on this Ethel right here is all cruel, one of my very few champions to have all cruel pieces, Xavier being almost there as well. But like I actually reached my 100% crit rate, maybe even a little bit more, and almost 250% crit damage while using crit rate gloves. Okay, so today will be a little bit about that, sort of like comparing crit rate gloves to crit damage gloves. I used to always assume that a nuker was going to be crit damage gloves only. It was the only way to reach like 250% plus crit damage. But as you keep playing this game, you'll start getting a couple more of these pieces. Quadruple roll on crit damage. I know, right? Really rare. I'm not expecting you guys to have this immediately, but for long term, what I'm simply saying is that you might eventually have a somewhat setup that works like this, especially when it's all cruel gear, right? We do have here, again, double roll on crit damage, and also pay attention to these rolls. These would be like 8% each. Sometimes it's not going to be as much. Unfortunately, it's going to be closer to like 6 here as well. Sorry, so 8 here, 6 here, but sometimes it might be a little bit more, but I've never seen really high to a point where you can get, if I'm not mistaken, close to about 10%. I do believe I have one somewhere. Let me pull her up. I think it's Zargala right here. No, she has 9%, okay? So on a 6-star item. So my question was, how lucky can you get with the sub-stat rolls, either for crit rate or crit damage, to hit those kinds of numbers? And we know that 6-star crit damage gloves are probably better, because I think 80% compared to 60% crit rate is actually better in terms of substats. Maybe you guys can confirm that, but I think this has a higher value of substat rolls than crit rate. However, here's the revelation for me after all this time, is that it is then easier to stack crit damage than it is to get crit rate. Therefore, crit rate gloves can actually be quite viable, especially if you have a lot of these pieces lying around. I do have a couple more examples here. We've got, where is she? The Seer. The Seer as well. I've got, check this out, quadruple roll on crit rate, okay? Super rare. And I've got 6-star quadruple roll on crit damage, okay? So again, closer to the 8% mark here. Let's assume the best that you can get, I think I've seen, is close to 10% for crit damage, but also 10% for crit rate. Therefore, if we look at the crit rate gloves versus crit damage gloves, assuming the best possible rolls ever, it would be 6 substat rolls for crit rate, and then the equivalent of 8 substat rolls for crit damage if you were to have 6-star maxed out gloves, okay? But the reason I say that it is harder to come by crit rate than crit damage, or rather it is easier to stack crit damage, is because you can get some on the amulet. I know you knew that already, but still, I was amazed to see that it was still possible to reach this kind of stats, or these stats, with that with that gear, right? Also, you have to take into consideration that I do have the maxed out crit damage from the Great Hall. Again, I know this is not beginner friendly. I'm not trying to tell you will have this on day one. I'm just saying to be cautious with the gear you are throwing out. Crit rate gloves can actually work out if they're in the right set and if they kind of work well with your other pieces that you might have gotten to complement that, okay? Like, these gloves are not amazing by themselves. We have 2 flat stats, defense and attack. We have some speed, we have some crit damage, but crit damage with speed with crit rate gloves is actually pretty solid. I can work with that. I can actually build something out of this, and as you just saw, it is working on my Ethel right now. And as you saw, she's my dedicated farmer, or she can be one of my dedicated farmers. I tend to use Foley a little bit more because I use him also in like arena. Tag arena, and so his stats are slightly better, but he is using crit damage gloves, okay? This guy does have 6-star crit damage gloves. Still, it is doable, guys. So again, to come back to this video right here where I said the reality of farming gear 18 months later, you sometimes might have to think a little bit outside the box. You might look at other builds or other content creators showcase the best possible gear in this game. Chances are you're not going to get that unless you're ready to spend $30,000 on this game, which you can spend. It's completely all right as well, but like, just set your expectation, okay? So I'm the other side of the spectrum, not spending, just trying to put together some sets that actually work well together. So I think this was a perfect example. I think also the 2 previous builds, defensive builds that I showed you guys, is maybe a little bit more accessible in the long run, but still, I'm quite happy overall with this Ethel. Her gear is pretty decent. You saw her as a farmer. We got 9 seconds. I did a video on her as well. Maybe we can backtrack here, find it. It was called a 12-second Ethel. Okay, I do have a section here, build. We have 3-star Jizzo build. We had got 30-second Ethel. That was a year ago when I had really crappy gear. She was in lifesteal on top of that. And then here we are about 7 months ago. We have the 12-second Ethel build. But to date, I beat that record and I got 9 seconds because her gear is now that much better. It also requires a lot of the procs on here. Okay, so I can cover the masteries here real quick, but this does come into play, Whirlwind of Death, and this here as well, Spirit Haste. So when your champions do die, especially if you're doing level 1 commons or uncommons, this is going to trigger. She's going to be well above the 200 range, therefore she's taking 2 turns before the enemies. Okay, so I get that. It is coming into play. We're also on maxed FPS at this point. So again, I'm not trying to pretend that like this is doable for everybody. I'm just sort of telling you guys yet again, think outside the box, okay? Especially now that I'm endgame, I have to do that if I want to stay relevant or at least try to keep up with the other players. Anyways, guys, that was it for today. I really just wanted to cover this real quick, crit rate gloves. And I know some of you guys probably use that on sort of like your clan boss champions, especially defense type champions that you might say, well, if you stack defense percent boots, this is not a good example. Let me pull another one out. I think I have my martyr here, right? If we do, nope, again, we have speed here. I do know I have one somewhere. Let me double check. Rosin right now is like that. Okay, so we have flat defense boots, flat defense chest piece, and then you would assume crit rate gloves, right, for me to hit a decent amount of crit rate, but I'm doing crit damage on top of that because I'm using yet one of what I believe to be the best auras in the game. It is the 25% crit rate, which is then allowing me to stack those crit damage gloves, right? So guys, that's all it was. I really wanted to somewhat cover this. One of the first champions that I am using with crit rate gloves on a decent set. I've used them before, but finally I'm at a point where this makes sense. Okay, so thinking a little bit outside the box, let me know what you think in the comments below. I know this is not a as big as a difference of using flat stat gloves, right? But still, sometimes it might actually help you guys better plan for the future. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you guys later.